All right, it's good to be with you all. I'm just going to jump right in and share my screen. Uh, Let me just say that it is, as you've probably heard multiple times, it's a little odd to be doing this in the middle of what's going on in the world and our country. And many folks are just tired. And I find moments like this is kind of a good distraction to kind of remember there are other things going on in the world, not to escape, but necessarily just to kind of use a different part of our body and soul for a few moments. So good. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be with you all today. I put in the chat, I'm going to go pretty fast and it's packed. So if you have questions and those kind of things, I will, I guess I'm looking in the Q&A as well, but will want to go ahead and interact with me on all the other websites and stuff, on the Twitter. So let's start. I want to do a little bit of quick introduction because I think it's important to set my particular context for where I serve and what I'm doing and who I am. This is me the last time I wore a tie. I think I was probably 18 or 19 and was working for a law firm in Sacramento right after high school. I'm a Gen Xer, but was a very early adopter of technology in my kind of world. In Sacramento, I went to school in kind of the rougher part of the city where IBM came in and put a whole computer lab in. So I learned how to code and do Fortran, COBOL, all those kind of things, and I remember none of it. But was very open and began to really appreciate technology and how that could be used. I'm born and raised Presbyterian from the West Coast, Northern California in particular, Trinity Presbyterian Church, a church founded out of the farm workers' strikes in the Central Valley, historically Filipino, but incredibly diverse. So I went to a fairly progressive congregation, Presbyterian, before I knew what progressive was. And I'm super grateful for the way that I've been raised with an eye towards activism, community care, diversity, all those kinds of things. So I'm Presbyterian are my roots. I now pastor First Presbyterian Church of Palo Alto. It is an older, white, incredibly activist congregation that was big during the anti-war movement during Vietnam. Robert McAfee Brown filled their pulpit. It's a place that has deep roots in social justice, but they've gotten older, pretty white. And so I'm here to kind of help figure out how to retell their story. It's a lovely, lovely congregation. I also have 3 children. My oldest child just graduated from college and lives in Minneapolis and was live storing everything that was going on. I'm so excited. You know, when you praise activists, you raise activists, and they were out and just, you know, we're getting all teary watching them kind of at these actions and really engaging. Our other 2 are high school and a first year in college. You get bonus points if you know what picture they're copying. So you can put that in the chat and see if anybody gets it. But I have this online lab basically of how folks have gone through the generations of looking at different technologies and how they've been used and who is using them. It's quite interesting. I have a great relationship with my children, and we kind of talk about social media all the time and what is engaging for them. I also am a huge practitioner. I've been leading online worship since somebody reminded me that I led a worship service called Tworship, which is a weird sounding word, but back in 2010, we had a worship service going on Twitter, 10 years ago. And so this is part of who I am, is this looking at online and in person and not really trying to debate whether either one is better or worse. And then I'm also very fancy. This is a great way to follow up. That's my now online outfit. The slippers make the outfit, I think. All right, so let's talk. I'm going to give you some building blocks for looking at digital kind of hybrid in-person Zoom experiences. I want to give a little bit of theological understanding, ask a couple of questions, tell you where I stand, talk about lived community and what that means in a hybrid space, and then talk about the space itself as you're moving into these kinds of places, and then talk a little bit about logistics. So we'll kind of start high end and land the plane. At least we'll try to do that. All right, so the first thing I think is important to know is I don't engage whether online or in person is better, real, not real. I believe that online, in person, they enhance each other. My experience over the last 25 years in ministry has been that when we begin to pit the two against each other, we lose out on both. I also push back strongly when folks want to say that in-person church is better than online or virtual church, simply because it's based on the assumption that when we gather together in person, that's a good experience always for everyone. And that's just not true. We don't know each other as much as we think we do. We just know that in some ways, online interaction, we get deeper sometimes. Now, there are things missing from online that we get in person, but I'm not interested in the battle between the two. And I don't put any energy into trying to prove one is better or the other. They enhance one another. So here's the questions I would have for you as you think about whether you want to do this hybrid church thing where you really want to create a worship experience or gathering experience that bridges both online and in-person worlds. The first thing that I think is really important, this is just about as you share the gospel, right? Can you articulate the gospel that you believe in a way that people believe that you actually believe it, and it's going to impact how you engage in ministry? So I actually think that I'll ask another question at the end, that unless you can begin to articulate why you think hybrid church is something that is important, or church beyond our buildings, our borders, and our geography is something worth pursuing, you need to be able to just answer that question for yourself. Because if you don't think it is, it's going to be really hard to be motivated to move through the tougher parts and kind of the drudgery of building community that is hybrid. There are a lot of more difficult pieces to it. And so if you're not able to champion that in some ways and bring people along and lead people into that, or grab folks who can help do that with your support, it's not going to work. The inertia to go back to in-person gathered, everything is centered around the physical table that you all can stand around. That inertia and gravity pull is so strong that if we're not able to articulate why we champion this, then it's not going to work. So questions I would ask: is there such thing as real church? Like, if you begin to say and think to yourself, well, real church is when we're back in the sanctuary and the other church is not real, then it's not going to work. Because central to this is understanding that church, however you want to describe it, is the same. Like, it's all real. It's all a way that we're connecting the body of Christ together. So if you can't say, if you see yourself, well, real church will happen when we get back together, and then there's the rest of church, that's not hybrid, right? We're going to do this here, and we'll show you, who are everybody's outside of this space, what we're doing. The next question I would ask is, and this is a challenge for us as well as the folks we're leading, is when do we cross a line between worshiping what we do and worshiping God? You will begin to hear pushback and wanting, if your congregations, or if you have people or small groups in your church who are starting to push you back into wanting to do things like they used to be, some of that is essential to who you are, right? Some of that is your ritual, your rites, things that define who you are as a congregation in your particular context. Other things are just because we've always done them that way. And that's not to be trite about that, but it is becoming clearer and clearer, some of the stuff that we really don't need. Our congregation stopped passing the plate about 3 or 4 months ago before we even did this, because we kind of realized we weren't actually, for offering, that didn't make any sense anymore. And so we stopped passing the plate, and it's mostly online and checks and all that kind of thing. And so we realized we didn't need that. And there was a little push. And now the way we do worship now on Zoom, it was just a natural progression. But we discovered that we didn't really need those things. And so the things that you really don't need, be careful that we don't start to worship those. So here's how I think about this, right? I think about this idea that we've stood behind wooden tables and spoken metaphorically about the expansive nature of Christ. We do that. God welcomes all to this table. This table joins us one to another beyond walls and borders. And now we are being given an opportunity and a chance to act as if we believe that is true. Because if we're speaking metaphorically about it, when we now have this chance to say to ourselves, hey, this table actually does welcome people beyond our borders, our walls, our boundaries, that's a really amazing, profound opportunity. But if we get to this point and we're saying, well, that's all metaphorical, really, we're just gathered around this particular table, that's a choice we make. But for me, I'm like, gosh, this is an opportunity to expand and live into this thing we've been talking about for so long, about how Christ welcomes all to this table. And whether now it's this table that is online, whether it's going to be as you return to your sanctuary, as a table that is online and in person, how we understand Christ's welcoming and radical hospitality is going to be crucial to whether you can make hybrid church work. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about First Presbyterian and what we did, and then I'm going to give you some a little bit of tactics as you go forward. We on the 20th, I'll say we were a congregation that looks like many of your churches, I'm sure, right? You may or not have screens, but you know, we all face forward. We're all doing the same thing. Where it's you know, we have a very generic, beautiful looking sanctuary. This is what we look like now, right? So we, on May 20th of this couple weeks ago, we decided as a congregation that we were not going to come back to in-person gathering until 2021. So we basically decided that through this year, we felt like our online experience was powerful and moving enough, and we didn't want to go back considering all the things that were going on, and we weren't going to even try. So we gave our chance to ask ourselves questions, to think through what this meant, and we eventually landed in the space that we now get to plan what it means to look like a church that's going to be different in the future. That if we really take seriously this idea about how we gather, what we do, the connections that we have, and the belief in the gospel that we profess as one that I'd say to our congregation all the time, if we don't believe that the gospel we profess is better than some of the other ones that are being professed out there right now, and we're not out there sharing that, then what are we doing? We're holding on to this amazing gift that we have. And so we have chosen to not try to get back together until the end of the year when we can fully live into a hybrid experience. So we're taking time to begin to grow our community online. So when we come back, and this is very important, when we come back, the community will no longer see itself as just an in-person, we know each other physically kind of experience. Because what we've done is we've lived community in an online space. And so what my strategy in thinking about this is we create this kind of community so that when we go back into our sanctuary, and you remember that inertia to return to what we were is going to be really strong. If the community is built so well for people who are not connected to our geographic location, when the folks who are near us get back into that sanctuary, they can do nothing but remember that there are people who are not here. So it's not me saying, hey, remember, there are folks engaging with us on Zoom. They will have already had lived experience with people who are living in. We have somebody right now who's worshiping with us from South Carolina, one from Texas, who have not dipped their foot into church for a long time, found our unique presence, and are now worshiping with us, coming to small groups. And so now the folks are experiencing these folks. So when we get back into kind of a hybrid space, it'll be a natural experience for them to think about, oh yeah, so-and-so is here, and you know, they're still here because they're from this particular area. So what I'm trying to create and help lead our community through is creating lived experience so that it's not just a tactic when you move back into a sanctuary, it's actually a community that is expressing itself and a community that understands itself as hybrid, not one that it's hybrid so that we can be community, we're community that is already hybrid. So there's a couple things we can do as you're thinking about how you go about doing this, especially now if you're an online experience. Change the language that no longer centers on physical space. As you welcome people, as you talk about things, the more references you make to where we used to meet, the more you're going to draw this line between those who are connecting with you, who have not connected, who will not be able to come back physically with you, and those who will be. Create more intimate spaces for interaction. So while these worship services that we do ours completely live on Zoom every Sunday. Roughly 100 people log in. So it's not a huge group, but it's not small. But so we break out into very short 15-minute coffee hour chit chats at the end for 10, 15 minutes. We're creating those kind of moments so that it's not just this big group experience, but we're creating these smaller places and inviting new people into those spaces so they can get to know the people who have been here for a while. And then I would be continually proactive about pushing against the inertia of going back, that it is going to come, if it hasn't already, about what we do, how we do it, all those kinds of things. And so how you talk about that, how you think about that, the processes, the questions, the meeting times, all of that, you got to push back again proactively. Don't let it happen to you, but let it be ahead of that. The other thing is you need to curate your space. So curated space is going to be hugely important. One is create physical reminders that in-person community is not the center of the worship experience. I am going to set up when we start heading back in 3 or 4 months, when we start really kind of shifting into this, if it's going to be safe to go back. We have a table, not our community table up front, but I'll have a table that'll look like a DJ station, basically, with lights, my laptop, so that folks see, right, that I am pastoring, leading worship, not just for the probably 20 people we can fit in our 200-person sanctuary at that point, but the people who are actually online. So it's a physical reminder. So how you do that is going to be different, but create a physical reminder that the people in that sanctuary, they're not a special class of church people. They are not, they're just in a worship hybrid experience that everybody else is in. In fact, there are going to be more people online than probably inside most of our sanctuaries. Again, think DJ station rather than streamed chancel or an altar, because when you're leading worship for everyone, it feels like you're leading worship for everyone. If you're leading worship that's just filmed, then it's a little more difficult. It's easy to fall back into I'm actually leading worship for the people here, and you all can watch who are on the other side of the camera. Now, so that requires a little more intentionality about reminding people that folks are not always there. A couple of other things: find ways to have faces shown to all people. So whether you have projection, we're going to project faces. We have a big movie screen we're going to put up probably behind me. We'll have a couple of different cameras that are going to move around so folks can see who's in the sanctuary. I encourage folks to we're going to encourage people to bring their laptops or phones as if they were not there and they were home, so they can interact as well. We encourage people to chat during our service now on Zoom. We're going to continue to do that. This is an opportunity to change seating if you want to. I think it's social distancing can allow you to take some pews out if that's something. I don't know how your churches, Presbyterian churches, I suspect all churches are sensitive about their pews, but this is an opportunity that folks might see that as an opportunity for some change. Upgrade your technology. So getting a decent camera. If your judicatory is helping with money, take them up on it. Good camera, good microphones, and get your internet speed up so that it is consistent and fast. And then always practice. Got to practice over and over and over again. Most of us can walk into the kind of traditional services we do, and it's just ingrained in us and we can do it. You need to practice the technology because there's so many transitions that go on, so many opportunities for things to go sideways. All right. For worship itself, create chat room greeters. So as you think about your greeters in person, who are greeting people in the chat room when they show up? Who are going to be the bouncers? Who are your folks as you train? If you have people that come in that need to be ushered into a different space, or there's kinds of disruptions, who are those people? And then who are your tech deacons? So who are the people that are going to be in the chat room, are going to be on the phone, are going to help people get connected into your online space, just as you would welcome and create welcoming space and assign things to people in live in-person worship. Do the same thing for your worship. And then mix in online worship leadership. So again, getting away from thinking we're doing worship here for the rest of you can experience it. No, we're doing worship together. Have your liturgist for the day be online. Have them project it up with them speaking. So they're from their phone. They're from their home. On occasion, I know of a couple pastors who aren't going to return to their gathering space because of their age. They're in that danger demographic, and so they're gonna lead worship via Zoom, and they have people that want to gather in the sanctuary. So they're like, well, I'm not going to be there. I'll Zoom. So occasionally preach from home. You're reminding people that this is a hybrid experience, not an observed experience from the outside. A couple more things. Think about ritual that doesn't create in and out. How do you have communion? How do you do laying on of hands virtually? Baptisms. There's some creative ways that people are doing some things out there. Lots of good stuff that's happening, but be sure that you're not saying this is the real one we're doing in person, and then the fake one or the non-real one or the one that'll just have to do is online. Create ritual that makes sense for both spaces. And then I'm always about encouraging interaction between folks who are attending. I am under no delusions that when I'm preaching in person that everybody is paying attention to me. I think that they're writing notes down, they're texting, there's all kinds of stuff probably going on. That's fine. If we can create a space that opens up people's hearts, minds, and heads, I call that a win. So we encourage people to interact during the time. It annoys some of our folks to have the chat room pop up all the time, but I'll take interaction any day. All right, so the big question for me and that I think we have to ask ourselves around this as I end my time is, do you have the capacity and conviction? So are you, your congregation, do you have the capacity and conviction to do this? This is not something you stumble into. This is not something like, oh, well, let's try this. You know, maybe, I don't know. But somebody has to champion this, because otherwise it is again, inertia to return back to the way you were, or the inertia to just show your worship to others. That's the capacity piece, right? Not everybody can do this. This is not the way that church has to be. This is one version of a way that people will gather for worship. If you don't have the capacity, your congregation doesn't, there are technological things that are going on. You know, I think trying to do something that is beyond, you know, it's not like we're squashing the hopes and dreams of people, but we're just being realistic about the struggles and obstacles that may come. So as you think about it, translate these things for how they may work in your life and your community. Yes, you might have that, or no. I think no is a great answer if that is what you really believe. Like, I can't do this, right? I mean, when you heard before about TikTok, some of you were gonna go like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do TikTok. Others like, I am all into TikTok, and your children and grandchildren are mortified, but think it's probably pretty cool, right? But if you just say, no, this is not for me, I would rather have that happen than for the begrudging and the resentment and kind of energy it would take to overcome that. And then there's the maybe, right? Maybe. I'm open to it. Let's keep talking. Let's look at this. Let's have conversations in the congregation. Maybe there are folks who can help us move in this direction. Or there's the not yet, and you get to wait. And that's when we decided our 6-month timeline, we got to wait. We didn't have to push and rush back. And it gives us time as a congregation to build that lived community before we try to do this hybrid community. Boom. All right, I'm going to look at the Q&A real quick here. Let's see if I can pop that open, or I'm going to stop sharing. How about that? I'm going to stop sharing.
You have quite a few. People were very.
Oh, I'm sure I do. Again, I
think there was always questions about Eucharist and baptism, and a lot of energy around rural and smaller churches.
Yes, yeah. And I think let me talk about those two things real quick. I think so. Every denomination judicatory is having to make their decisions about communion. I know that the Episcopal Church has, as an adjacent denomination, watching some of y'all go at each other and everything. I have two reactions. I'm like, oh, come on, like, be nice to each other. And then there's the other reactions like, oh, well, God, we're not doing that. Like, I think there's some relief of. So our denomination, our original outcome was wait. That was the initial. And our polity is a little different. We can't tell people what to do, really. I mean, it's just I don't know. And then some of us were doing it anyway, and I don't know if that influenced it or not, but it eventually came out. These are extraordinary times. Have communion. I actually think it's one of the most beautiful parts of our worship service. If you look up First Presbyterian Church on YouTube, the moment where everybody puts their bread up to the camera and breaks it is holy for me. So and I've always wanted to have communion every week, and now we do. So that's one thing. Baptisms, I know of one where we had a family who was baptizing a kid, and the elder was, fortunately the child's parents were elders, so the pastor said the words online, and the elders and their family got to do the water, and it was just powerful experience. You're going to have to navigate that for your own denominational life and all of that kind of stuff. I don't want to, poke bears or anything. In terms of rural, all those kind of things.
Ecumenical group. So there's a lot of.
Good.
So it's not just a comparison. There's a lot of different polities and
God bless y'all as you're figuring this out, because I know that communion becomes the hot button issue where people outside of us, they don't really care. Like, it is not. So we need to have those theological discussions, and then y'all figure it out. Anyway. rural. So I've seen two faces of the rural piece. One, so there's a digital divide, phones, internet. That's a serious question, right? If you can't, if that's going to be too frustrating, don't do it. The other piece is, though, I know some of our rural communities have been doing online community experience because they've had to far before the rest of us did. I mean, it just made sense that the geography was so big that they were doing this. So they're in some ways very situated to do this. So I think, again, you're going to have to translate this for who you are, where you are. This is what what I don't want us to do is begin to lift up hybrid worship as the next big thing, right? That's the worst thing we can do because every place is unique. You all as leaders are unique and you bring your certain amount of skills and passions. And so I think you have to just acknowledge that it's going to be different everywhere. I know there's tons of questions, but I'm at the end of my time. The slides will be available. Go ahead and hit me up on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I love the distraction. Thank you all.
Thank
Peace.
you.